They called it the Six Sotok, a tiny, forbidden plot of land where every Soviet family fought a secret war against scarcity. Under communism, the most powerful insurance policy wasn't held in a bank. It was hidden in the backyards, and these 15 forgotten secrets of survival are the reason millions endured. The potato firewall. Under a system that often failed to provide, the humble potato became the ultimate line of defense against scarcity. It wasn't just a vegetable, it was an insurance policy against hunger. And the Dacha was where that policy was enacted every single year. For the Soviet family, the potato, or kartoshka, was king. It was the staple that guaranteed survival when the state stores offered empty shelves. In a tiny 600 square meter plot, 1/3 of the space might be dedicated solely to growing these tubers, a massive undertaking driven not by culinary desire, but by sheer necessity. This annual ritual demanded the mobilization of the entire family, often traveling hundreds of miles outside the city for the planting and harvest known simply as potato days. Grandfathers drove the plows, children picked the beetles, and grandmothers directed the storage. You could smell the wet earth and the soot from the train wheels as the entire extended family arrived to start the labor. Growing 20 buckets of potatoes was not a hobby. It was the difference between a secure winter and real hardship. The flavor of the homegrown crop was secondary to its ability to simply exist, to store easily, and to feed many mouths cheaply. This dedication to the tuber meant that even as the state's economy staggered, the average family could always find fuel for the cold months ahead. It was a survival strategy as simple as it was profound, but in a garden dedicated entirely to necessity. How did a family ensure they got the maximum possible yield from every single inch of that precious soil? The three-tier garden. With dacha plots often strictly limited, Soviet gardeners couldn't afford a single inch of bare soil. They practiced a brutal efficiency that modern farmers call intercropping, and they mastered it out of sheer necessity, turning a two-dimensional plot into a three-dimensional vertical farm. Since space was so tightly rationed, every single plant had to pull its weight and interact with its neighbors. This was the philosophy behind the three-tier garden. The first tier was the slow, sprawling main crop, like the heavy heads of cabbage or the large potato mounds. Then came the second tier, where gardeners would tuck in medium-speed crops like carrots or beetroots alongside the main plants. But the genius was in the third tier. Quick-sprouting annuals like radishes or leafy greens were sown in between rows, harvested and gone within 3 weeks, leaving the soil clear just as the larger crops needed the space to mature. This constant game of soil. Tetris ensured a non-stop harvest from early spring until the first heavy snow. It wasn't just about fitting more food. It was about maximizing the sun, the water, and the fertility in a carefully managed cycle of resourcefulness. This ingenuity of layering produce could increase the edible yield of a small plot by up to 40%. This ingenuity of stacking harvests saved the average family, but none of it would have been possible without one single, sharp, grassy herb, a powerful ingredient required for the biggest preservation task of the entire year. The weed of necessity, dill. Walk into any dacha plot in August, and one sharp, grassy scent dominates the air: dill. This wasn't a flavor choice. It was a mandatory, non-negotiable component required for the most crucial task of all: preservation, making dill the very scent of summer survival. For the Soviet gardener, dill was less an herb and more a weed of necessity. It was allowed, even encouraged, to spread aggressively through the rows because every part of the plant was required to ensure the survival of other vegetables through the winter. The feathery fronds were chopped into salads, the flowers added an essential aromatic element to summer soups, and the tough, woody stalks were critical. These stalks were placed into jars alongside cucumbers, tomatoes, and cabbage to impart not only flavor, but also a necessary chemical element that helped guarantee successful pickling. No respectable family would attempt the mass canning process, known as zakatka, without huge quantities of dill, so much that the harvest required its own scythe. Its prolific nature was a blessing, providing an endless supply that required almost no maintenance, standing ready for the massive annual effort to beat the coming freeze. Without this fierce, self-seeding herb, the preservation efforts would have failed. But failure wasn't an option. The true battle for survival was about to begin indoors, where a glittering glass army was prepared to face the 9 months of winter. The autumn arsenal. The Dacha harvest was a race against the first frost, but the real work happened indoors. When the bounty came in, entire basements and shelves were transformed into a glittering, glass jar army ready to defeat the long, barren Russian winter. This was the annual process of zakatka, which translates simply as canning or putting up. But it was far more than a kitchen hobby. It was the autumn arsenal. Every family knew that the garden's survival was meaningless if the crops couldn't be stored without refrigeration, which was a luxury or reliable state supplies. The women, often led by the babushka, spent weeks in the intense heat of boiling water and steam, processing every single tomato, cucumber, cabbage head, and jar of currant jam. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering. This was a production that could take up to 300 hours of labor per family, and if a seal failed, the entire winter's supply was at risk. The process guaranteed the family had vitamins and flavor. During the 9 or 10 months of cold, walking into that basement, lined wall to wall with shining sealed produce, was like viewing a powerful, edible bank account, ensuring the family against the economic and climatic uncertainty outside. The autumn arsenal stood as a symbol of domestic strength and self-reliance. Yet, this entire preservation system depended on the success of the plants themselves. And to get the most potent nutrients from the soil, Dacha gardeners turned to a hidden, natural resource for their essential vitamins: the black gold. Long before imported citrus became a supermarket standard, a native, often spiky shrub delivered a critical dose of immune defense. This shrub produced tiny, resilient fruit, the black gold of the Dacha, making the black currant patch the family pharmacy hidden in the plot's corner. In the Soviet Union, reliable sources of vitamin C were not guaranteed, especially during the long, dark winters. This made the black currant, or Ribes nigrum, absolutely vital. This tough shrub was exceptionally cold-hardy and could thrive in the most challenging northern climates, providing a concentrated source of nutrition. Families harvested the small, dark berries to make powerful teas, syrups, and thick jams. These preparations were more than desserts. They were medicinal tinctures used to ward off sickness and treat winter deficiencies. When there were no antibiotics, no imported pills, and the local doctor was unreachable, that black currant syrup was the only thing standing between a healthy winter and severe sickness. Children were often given spoonfuls of concentrated black currant syrup daily, reinforcing the plant's essential role as a natural defense. The ability to grow one's own supply of this powerful antioxidant meant families didn't have to rely on the often unpredictable state supply chain for basic health needs, giving them a small, crucial measure of control. The black currant was a tiny, tart champion of human health. But as important as it was to nourish the family, the gardener also needed a simple, beautiful defense system to protect the very plants that produce this vital food: the simple guard. Soviet-era gardening didn't involve complex chemical sprays or imported pesticides. Instead, families relied on an old-world defense system that was simple, beautiful, and completely organic. The vibrant, fiercely scented marigold, planted as the simple guard. The Dacha gardener knew that to protect vital food crops like potatoes and tomatoes, you didn't need a factory-produced chemical. You simply needed to understand the hidden language of plants. The humble marigold was the ultimate protective companion. Planted strategically around vulnerable beds, its roots release powerful chemicals into the soil that actively drive out nematodes, tiny microscopic worms that damage root systems. Above ground, its bright, strong scent confuses and repels flying insects that would otherwise devour leaves and fruit. It was a perfect self-sustaining defense mechanism. The flowers were not grown for decoration alone. Their dazzling yellow and orange blooms were, in fact, the most crucial component of the family's pest control, a living barrier that shielded the harvest. This wisdom, passed down through generations, allowed families to ensure the integrity of their food without ever relying on the unpredictable state supplies of agricultural aids. This beautiful solution helped keep the roots healthy and the leaves whole. But to truly maximize the productivity of every single plant they grew, Dacha families needed a different kind of simple, elegant support system, a tool designed specifically to save them effort and time: the scythe of the soil. Look closely at the implements stored in a Dacha shed, and you won't see fancy ergonomic gadgets. You'll see a simple, flat-bladed wonder designed for speed and minimum effort in heavy, dense clay, the scythe of the soil. This ingenious tool, known in many Slavic countries as a Fokine plane cutter or a similar flat-bladed hoe, was the essential workhorse of the Soviet garden. Unlike the heavy American garden hoe that chops deeply, this tool was designed to be skimmed just below the soil's surface, cutting the stems of weeds at the root crown rather than disturbing the ground deeply. This no-dig principle, born not of environmental philosophy but of sheer physical necessity, saved the gardener immense effort. This one tool slashed weeding time by 50%, giving them more hours for the harvest. By only disturbing the top inch or two of soil, it preserved vital moisture underneath and prevented new weed seeds from being brought up to the light. It was simple, often homemade, and endlessly repairable. It was the epitome of Soviet ingenuity, a single, efficient tool that could plant, weed, hill up potatoes, and create trenches, allowing the gardener to work faster and protect the longevity of the soil. The scythe of the soil allowed the Dacha gardener to work smarter, not harder, to cultivate a harvest. But even with the most efficient tools, a challenging climate always required an extra layer of defense, a pocket of artificial summer created by the power of simple improvisation. The improvised warmth. The growing season in many Soviet regions was brutally short, often just 90 frost-free days. To beat the calendar, the Dacha gardener mastered the art of the makeshift, using cheap plastic sheeting to create a pocket of artificial summer and calling it the improvised warmth. The challenge was to grow the crops that truly mattered, like tender tomatoes and peppers, which simply could not tolerate the unpredictable springs and early autumn frosts. Since factory-built glass greenhouses were an unimaginable luxury, the family turned to what was available: scrap wood, simple wire, and thin polyethylene film, or polyetylenovaya plyonka. These materials were fashioned into small, low tunnels, or simple, cold frames, creating a microclimate where temperatures could soar into the high 70s Fahrenheit, even when the air outside hovered just above freezing. This improvisational skill extended the season by critical weeks, allowing the family to start seeds earlier and harvest crucial food longer. The state invested fortunes in official party buildings, but for the family, all they needed was a few wooden stakes and a film of plastic, a 10-ruble solution that yielded hundreds of rubles worth of food. The sight of these simple plastic structures glistening in the morning sun wasn't ugly. It was a symbol of quiet ingenuity, a small act of defiance against the harsh, unforgiving climate. These homemade shelters were necessary to nurture the plants. But even the best growing environment would fail without constant nourishment, meaning the Dacha gardener had to master another form of ingenuity: extracting zero-waste fertilizer from the deepest levels of their household scraps. The circle of life. Waste was not an option in the Soviet economy. In the Dacha, everything, from coffee grounds to ash and kitchen scraps, was considered a vital resource, feeding the next season's growth in a simple, hidden process known as the circle of life. The average gardener could not walk down to a store and buy bags of imported chemical fertilizer. Instead, the Dacha relied on a zero-waste mentality born of necessity. Rather than using large, complex compost bins, gardeners dug simple, strategic trenches or pits, often right between the main rows of vegetables. These trenches became the subterranean dumping grounds for potato peels, weeds, old leaves, and even fish heads from the summer catch. Over the course of the season, this material slowly broke down, releasing nutrients directly to the plant roots. Furthermore, every ounce of wood ash from the burning stove was carefully saved and worked into the soil, providing essential potassium that encouraged hardy fruit set. This deeply ingrained respect for resources was a hallmark of the Dacha gardener. Nothing left the property that couldn't be recycled into new life. This reliance on organic waste created fertile soil and powerful plants. But the Dacha plot also cultivated a fierce, pungent root that served not only as a defense against winter sickness, but as a powerful secret preservative in their pickling jars. The fiery root. A plant so tenacious it borders on invasive, horseradish, was deliberately planted in nearly every dacha. Its powerful, punishing root served two distinct purposes. one culinary, creating a searing sauce, and one absolutely essential for large-scale preservation. The root, known as kren, was a fierce seasoning, grated raw and mixed with beet juice to create a vibrant, fire-breathing condiment. It provided a powerful, clear kick that cut through the richness of heavy winter foods. But for the Dacha gardener, its true value lay in the thick, ribbed leaves. When pickling cucumbers, cabbage, or tomatoes in the large vats, these leaves were tucked carefully around the vegetables. They contain a natural, active enzyme that helps the fermented vegetables retain their snap and crispness, preventing them from turning soft and mushy over months of storage. It wasn't a flavor enhancer, it was a natural biostabilizer. Without the large protective leaves of the horseradish plant, the hundreds of jars prepared during zakatka would lack the satisfying texture that made them essential table fare. This dual role, a fierce spice and a powerful structural preservative, made the horseradish patch an irreplaceable weapon and a spice in the family's survival arsenal. The fiery root guaranteed a solid texture to the preserved harvest. But after months of eating pickled and stored food, the family desperately needed the taste of true freshness, and the first signal of spring came in a surprising, bright green form. The first green. After the long, nutrient-starved winter, the sight of the first green shoots was a celebration. But one plant, with its sharp, acidic tang, was the earliest indicator that fresh, vital food was back on the table. The mighty, unassuming sorrel. In the challenging climate of the Soviet Union, the onset of spring often meant a severe vitamin deficiency after months of eating only pickled and stored root vegetables. The need for fresh greens was desperate. The plant Rumex acetosa, known as sorrel or chaval, was the answer. It requires little heat to sprout, often appearing through the thawing soil weeks before lettuce or spinach. Its leaves are instantly recognizable by their intensely acidic, lemony flavor, a sharp contrast to the dull taste of preserved food. Families would quickly gather the early leaves to make the iconic green borscht, zelyony borscht, a bright, nourishing soup that was practically a tonic for the body after the deprivation of winter. This small, easily grown plant was a powerful natural supplement, a symbol of health and renewal that guaranteed the family's return to a fresh, vibrant diet. The sharp taste of sorrel truly signaled the end of the long, cold season. Yet, another berry, smaller and much tougher, held an even more potent secret, a golden medicine hidden on the branches of a thorny, wild-looking shrub. The golden berry. Imagine a shrub covered in tiny, luminous orange jewels, a fruit so powerfully nutritious that it was used by Soviet cosmonauts. This was the wild, often spiky prize of the northern Dacha plots, the golden berry. The plant is sea buckthorn, or oblipika, and it thrives in the harsh, sandy soils of the Russian north. Its value was astronomical, not because of its taste, which is notoriously tart, but because of its medicinal treasure. The small orange fruits contain an unbelievable concentration of vitamin C, far surpassing citrus, alongside essential fatty acids and antioxidants. For a state apparatus focused on peak human performance, the sea buckthorn became a prized commodity, utilized in state health programs, and even packaged into rations for spaceflight. But long before that, Dacha families were pressing the berries for their healing, rich orange oil. The harvest was difficult due to the plant's fierce thorns, making the successful collection of berries a point of pride. This tough, ancient shrub provided a concentrated, homegrown defense against ailments, confirming the Dacha's role as both garden and natural pharmacy. The golden berry provided concentrated health for the family, but resourcefulness wasn't just about what you grew. It was about ensuring that every single plant in the garden provided a dual harvest, maximizing the yield from every single bulb and root. The dual harvest. The modern gardener often discards the onion top and only pulls the bulb. But the Dacha principle was simple. If a plant can offer two separate vital harvests, you take both, maximizing the effort in what they called the dual harvest. Resourcefulness meant viewing a single plant as a sequence of potential meals. In early spring, long before the onion bulb matured underground, the family would harvest its tender green tops, known as scallions or green onions. These sharp, fresh greens were diced into the earliest salads, providing flavor and vitamins to break the winter monotony. The plant was not damaged. It was simply pruned, allowing the bulb to continue growing to maturity for later storage. A similar technique applied to garlic. Instead of waiting for the bulb, they harvested the curly, delicate scapes, the flower stalks, that emerged in early summer. These scapes were used in stir-fries and pickles, giving the gardener two completely different products from a single planting. This efficiency of time and space was non-negotiable. Every Dacha family understood that pulling maximum value from every single bulb was key to ensuring that every meal across every season was accounted for. This mastery of efficiency ensured that no part of the plant went to waste and that every season had its bounty. But even with this skill, the garden always had gaps, empty pockets that needed to be filled quickly by a humble vegetable that could go from seed to plate in barely 20 days. The gaps filler. The most crucial element in Soviet space management wasn't the permanent fixtures, but the fast, expendable crops used to fill the literal gaps between slower-growing produce. This was the philosophy behind the gaps filler, and it centered on the humble, quick-sprouting radish. The radish was the true sprinting champion of the Dacha. With an incredibly short maturity time, some varieties could go from seed to edible root in barely 20 days. It became the ideal vegetable for intercropping and starting the season. As soon as the soil could be worked, tiny beds of radishes were sown in the empty spaces that would eventually be taken over by sprawling tomatoes, cabbages, and potatoes. This guaranteed the family could enjoy the first fresh, crunchy food of spring long before any other crop was ready, providing vital texture and flavor after a winter of preserved meals. Once harvested, the radish was gone, clearing the space perfectly for the next, slower-growing plant to take root without any competition. It was an elegant system of rotational efficiency, ensuring that the Dacha provided food for every stage of the growing cycle, never leaving a patch of soil unused. It was a race against the clock that the radish won every single time. The radish was the perfect quick fix for the stomach and the soil. But while the state-run farms focused on quantity and size, the Dacha gardener pursued a hidden, underground legacy, a focus on intense flavor and culinary excellence. The hidden legacy. State farms demanded perfect red globes that could survive long train journeys. The Dacha demanded one thing only: an explosion of unforgettable flavor. This led to a clandestine legacy of carefully saved heirloom seeds, the hidden legacy. Under the Soviet system, agricultural production was focused on standardization and mass supply, resulting in bland, often mealy produce built for endurance, not eating. The Dacha, however, was a place of personal freedom, and gardeners pursued flavor above all else. This meant deliberately shunning the uniform state varieties and cultivating heirloom seeds passed down generation to generation. These seeds produced tomatoes that were pink, yellow, or strangely ribbed and oddly shaped, varieties that were too soft to travel, but burst with intense sweetness and juice on the vine. This seed packet was a tiny, illegal form of cultural preservation, ensuring that the real taste of their history and land survived even if the government tried to eliminate it. The tomatoes in particular represented a visceral contrast between the gray reality of state food and the rich, colorful bounty of personal effort. The flavor was the ultimate metric, validating the immense labor poured into the tiny plot of land every year. This pursuit of flavor defined the Soviet Dacha gardener, turning a meager plot into an essential engine of survival and culture. These small, forgotten secrets of necessity, efficiency, and resilience allowed entire families to endure, and they stand today as a testament to the power of the hands that feed. These secrets weren't just about food, they were a lesson in enduring when the world turns cold. If you found a secret worth planting in your own life, hit the like button and subscribe to uncover more forgotten history and hidden ingenuity.